Okay, let's see if I can put the camera on. Okay. If someone is watching the stream, could you please tell me if you can hear me all right? Okay. So today I would like to do a quick sketch. But we will use a tool that I just got my hands on, and this is what's in this mysterious black box. And let's do some unboxing. I'm sorry that my voice is still not really well after my cold. Okay, so this is something that's called IndieGraph, and this is a serial number 1, prototype number 18. So this is still a pre-production thing, and I would like to show it to you. This is something I got from the maker, who is going to be making a Kickstarter campaign to make this product a reality. And this is a pen that can be this is called IndieGraph, that can be used with India ink. So ink that is not recommended for regular fountain pens, like for example the ones that I usually use, so like Lamy pens or something. And this is because these inks are waterproof, and if you leave them for some time, not used, just a few days, they tend to dry up and you cannot remove them from the pen anymore. You have to clean it and take it apart. And what is this pen about? This is like a fountain pen, but it has a reservoir with water here in the cap. So when it's closed, it has a O-ring here, so it's sealed, and the water here in this reservoir here in the cap keeps the pen nib moist, so the pen nib does not dry up, and you can leave it for a week or 2 or 3 without using it. And if there's water here, it should not dry out, and you can just open it and use it without any problems. And this is the theory. This is a demo unit that I got to test, so I'll be testing it, doing stuff with it, and then I will send my thoughts to the maker before he actually starts on the Kickstarter campaign. So you'll be able to buy it, and this is like a prototype unit, so it's not perfect, but the quality of this is really nice. And it actually uses a converter type thing, so you can put any like ink that you want in here, and especially like India ink. And it also uses a German brand nibs that you can replace, and this is actually the M variety, so it's like a middle line thickness. So we'll do the sketch with this, and because this is India ink, so because this is like waterproof ink, we will color it really fast with watercolors. And today I would like to paint this, which is a nice car that I spotted on the street some time ago, and I made a photo. So let's do nice cute car with watercolors and black lines with this pen. And from what I tested, this pen actually works better on watercolor paper than on plain paper, because from what I tested, it actually is a little bit wet. Let me focus this. This pen is actually a bit wet, so the ink flow is really good, and it's too good actually for me. I think would be better the fine nib than the medium one that I have here. But as you can see, the ink flow is really good, and I can do nice lines. And because this ink is waterproof, it should be okay with just using watercolors on top of it. And let's test it now. Hi everyone! I'm just going through this pen that I'll be using today. Okay, so because this is India ink, it actually is a mix that I got from the maker. This is a mix made from the Dr. P.H. Martin's Black Star ink, so it should be nice and waterproof, and it is. So even after such a short time, I can use just watercolors here and nothing happens. And this is great because I really like to use black waterproof ink with watercolors, and the problem is always with the pen clogging up and drying out. But here you can see the ink is staying perfectly waterproof, and that's great. Sorry. Okay, so first let's sketch something. I'll try to keep this sketch loose this time, so let's do it with the Blackwing 602. And while I'm sketching, if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. I have the chat open here, and I also have some questions that you asked in the comments that I got from you. I'll just open the file here and we can start sketching. Okay, so I'll go from the newest question. Let me zoom a bit. Okay, so Kali Hagen asks, I don't know if you have already covered this, but what was it like working on your name? So if you for those of you that don't know, I was working in the animation studio that did the animated movie Your Name, and that was already, I think, 2 years ago, and I worked there for 4 years. I have to eat some chocolate or something, so my voice starts. I'm sorry. So I was working there for 4 years, and I did some other stuff before we started on the movie. When I joined the studio, it was a kind of unfortunate time because they were already finishing one movie that I wanted kind of to take part in, because it was the Garden of Words animation, and because that animation was really pretty, it had really pretty backgrounds, I wanted to kind of participate in it. Participating in such a long animation was one of the things that I wanted to do, but I was too late, and in the end we started from different things, and it was good that I did not participate like from the start, because I had some time to level up my skills, so I was able to be actually useful to the backgrounds stuff, because I did backgrounds for the animation. When the your name thing actually started, because I was only just out from the university, and at the university I was doing just work by myself, so I was not used to working in like a team of people that you have to adjust your style and adjust your work style and adjust your painting style, so it matches actually the pictures that other people do enough, so it can be used in the animation. And I'm kind of happy that I had like 2 years and a half to adjust to the studio, and I was lucky enough that the studio was a okay place to work, because I know about a lot of animation studios in Japan that just exploit their staff until they are kind of exploited out or dead. So my wages were enough, so I could just stay in Tokyo, and I could continue working and continue learning to do the things that I had to learn to just be useful later. And I was working on backgrounds, so I was painting things like from the layouts that the animators give you. So of course there is some creative space to fill, because you have to work up from the sketch that you get, and the sketch is not perfect, so there is still some space for creativity there, but it is kind of limited. I mean, you cannot just do anything you want, because you already have the image that the background director gives you, and there is like the image of the animation itself that is kind of decided between the director and the backgrounds director, and there are some backgrounds that are already done, so you have to match everything with the content also, but also with the style of the drawing, and the texture, and how do you use the brushes, and everything has to be similar to the thing that is already decided. So it's more of a work of a like specialists. So it's more similar to making, for example, furniture to size than just doing whatever you want with the piece of wood that you get. So it's more painting order-made things that have to be perfect. And then the thing that you painted is, of course, corrected by the background director and the director himself. So even though you give your best to make the best background or the best painting that you can, it's still later corrected by the directing staff. So it can be a bit frustrating that you spend, for example, half a day painting a tree, and then you can see that the tree has been completely corrected and sometimes sent into oblivion by the staff, because it didn't match the image or whatever. But it had to be done, because style of the whole movie and the contents of the whole movie takes precedence. So it was kind of frustrating at times, but I learned a lot. Painting efficiently and painting in a style that was given to you, and I learned how to work more or less in a team, I think. And because I later got some opportunities to actually direct a short movie in this animation studio, and then after leaving that animation studio, I also directed a small animation in a different studio. I'm kind of aware how hard it is to just make something like this. Okay, let's make it more rounder here. Okay, so question from Reloy. Can you talk about the difference between drawing and painting in plein air and from a reference picture? My approach is similar. Of course, when I'm painting outside, I don't have the all the tools and all the kind of ease of use of those tools that I have in the studio at my desk. So you have to work with what you have and with the time you have and with the light that you have, and the light changes all the time when you're outside, so it's really hard to keep the image consistent sometimes, because especially if you are doing a painting that will take you more than an hour, the lighting will change a lot, and sometimes even if you are doing a quick sketch, you can have a cloud that just comes and changes everything. So that's kind of inevitable, but you have a chance to look at a thing that is still 3D. So you have an object that is three-dimensional, and you can see the dimensionality, and it's kind of easier to show it in your picture, because you actually see the three dimensions, and you can just go around some things and take a different angle if you don't like the angle that you're seeing right now. So that's a huge advantage. But if you have only a photo, you already have some things decided, and you cannot just go and see what's around the corner. But the most important thing I think is that when you have a photo, you already have some things that are kind of implanted in this photo. For example, the angle of the camera, how wide angle or how narrow angle lenses were used, and depth of field and stuff like how colors are represented, and how the scene was lit, and everything is kind of decided. So it's easier to kind of forget that you're looking at a photo and just start painting what you see on the photo, and do kind of forget that this is a real scene that could be painted differently, but just because you already saw the photo, your mind kind of remembers what was in the photo and tries to get closer and closer to what you saw in the photo. And it's hard to take, for example, a scene like this from a photo and turn it into a night scene, for example, or sundown scene or morning scene. But when you are painting outside, it's kind of easier to imagine how this scene could look like in a different lighting. I guess I like to work from nature, but I also like to work from photos. It's a completely different experience, but especially because of the 3D aspect. But if you spend a bit of time looking at a photo and kind of trying to analyze what you're seeing, so not only copying the flat image but kind of analyzing what is in the photo and trying to reimagine in your head how all the things look like and how they connect to each other and how in 3D space they are situated, then painting from a photo is also really nice and useful. It's actually a nice exercise that you can do. It's like painting from a photo something that you can see in a picture, but changing the perspective or painting it from a different angle than it is actually photographed at. So you have to imagine and put like in the 3D information that was lost when the picture was taken. Okay, so I have a car, and now let's use the indie graph. I'll zoom a little bit so you can see better probably. And let's do the lines. The picture is small. There's a problem with this is like this cap doesn't have this part here, so it rolls really well. But well, okay, let's try to add the lines. Okay, I'll just check another question. There are some questions that I cannot answer because they would require me showing things, but I'll try to take something from here. Abe Levi asks a lot of things, but also about buckling paper and how to avoid it. This is a thing that I don't have so much knowledge about because I do not use so much water in my watercolors. I mean, I rarely wet like large areas of the paper at once, and even if I do it, it's only just like a piece of sky or something like that. And so because I'm using quite heavy watercolor paper, like I rarely use anything that's less than 300 grams or thereabouts. I can get away with just painting straight on the paper without first stretching it, and if I tape the paper to a wooden board from all sides just with masking tape, I can basically get away with just the paper as it is. And using a hair dryer from the opposite side than the paper has like buckled. So if the paper is buckled like this, you can use it. You can use the hair dryer from the opposite side of the paper to make it buckle the other way around. But yeah, this is just like a temporary solution. So basically, if you use heavyweight watercolor paper, you can kind of get away without with buckling so much. But even with heavyweight watercolor paper, I sometimes have problems with it, especially like in places that require a lot of paint, like sky gradients and stuff like that. I often end up with just like wavy paper a bit, but it's enough for the paint to dry differently in some areas, so it ends up a bit of like gradient of waves of colors. So probably it would be better to just do it the right way. So use heavyweight watercolor paper and stretch it before painting, but I'm kind of too lazy to do that, and I try to avoid it if I can. There are some tutorials on YouTube how to stretch watercolor paper. I haven't done it so much, so I'm not an expert on this. By the way, I'm using here Hanemure watercolor sketchbook, which is similar to the Moleskine watercolor sketchbooks. So the paper is a watercolor paper, but it's not so heavy. I think it's about 200 grams paper, and the texture is also not so prominent. But I like how it works with inks, and because we are working with just ink pen, I thought that it would be a nice choice for this. I'm trying to hold this pen a little bit further from the nib, so I can get more nice and wavy lines. It does not require any pressure to draw, so it really works like just a regular fountain pen, because it is basically just a regular fountain pen with a fancy cap. Okay. But I have to say that the flow of the ink is really intensive. The pen is really wet, especially with the original ink that came with it. I think it was too wet even, so I had to replace the ink with the Dr. P.H. Martin's, which is more how do you call it? Less viscous, more viscous. So it the flow is better and easier to control with this ink, but the maker told me that it can clog the pen if I leave it too much, even though it should not, but so I guess it would be better with the F nib, the fine one, for more like easier control over the lines. But the lines are really black and matte and should be waterproof, so we can color this with watercolors. Hi! Okay, let me look up a question. Okay, about painting tiles. This is, by the way, a question from Timothy Santos. Okay, so while painting tiles, I try to show that each tile is a separate thing. So if I can, I try to paint like 1 or 2 tiles with one color and then change the color a bit, mix it again on my palette using a bit different colors, which produces similar mixture, but the color is a bit different. So then I can make a nice variation, like no two, for example, how they call them in English, renga. So it's bricks. No two bricks are like perfectly the same color. So it actually is nice to vary the color a bit from, but making it from brick to brick would take too much time. So I usually do like a few bricks with one color from in random direction, and then go change the color a bit and make a few bricks more, and then change the color a bit and make a few bricks more, and then go back to the first color and do a bit more. So it allows me to make a nice varied wall. And also if the spaces between the bricks are lighter than the bricks, I don't paint them or paint them beforehand and then layer on top of that the color of the bricks themselves. But if it's darker, I also try to not to paint in between and then add the color at the end. Okay, and there's like a pattern here. Okay, so this pen is a bit wet. It is a fountain pen, but I don't know if it has so much advantage on like fine liners than that it's kind of worth the whole kind of making it and kickstarting it. So again, this is a pen that can be used with India ink, so this ink is waterproof and this ink should not smudge and when I use watercolor on top of it, but it cannot be used with usual fountain pens because it will clog them up if you leave them for a few days or without use. And because this pen has a reservoir with water here in the cap, it should stay nice and moist and should be able to withstand this ink. But it's a bit hard to control because the ink flow is too good even, I think, and I don't know if just using a regular, like a multi-liner like this would be better or not. The lines are obviously blacker and nicer because the India ink is really black and matte, so it's nice in this way, but I don't know, I still have to test it more in other the brush you use matters. When painting tiles, you can paint with a flat brush, which helps a bit. I used to do that, paint with a flat brush, but recently like brush like this. But recently I haven't been using flat brushes because I kind of like the roundness of the tiles when you get to the corners. So I think that using just a regular brush is of course, like appropriate size is just okay. Let's color this, and I have just my Schmincke watercolor set here, and I'll try to quickly color this one, and let's see what happens with the ink when we start to put watercolors on top of it, and it should be okay. Okay, next question. Let's see what I can answer from the list that you have sent. Handling brush with your hand. Is there anything that helps you keep the strokes you make as stable and precise as they are? I don't know actually. I just use a brush like this, and because I paint with watercolors, I always am kind of aware what places are already dried up, and this is the thing that you have to be really careful about, so you don't smudge any things that you already painted. I use a lot of my hair dryer in when I'm painting here at my desk, so I can dry stuff up more quickly, and I'm not worried about smudging something with my hand. I can just put my hand on my picture and it's okay. But if you paint with more water, and if you paint like wet on wet, and have problems without having like any place to put your hand on, you can use like a rod that supports your hand from the opposite side of the picture. If you've seen anyone like sign painters, they use a lot like a support, I don't know how it's called, rod, I guess. Okay, so I'm mixing some blues. Let us add some color. Okay, so the ink is holding really nicely. I don't have any smudging, I guess. And if it comes to stability of hand, I don't think that this is like a really necessary thing. I actually try to hold my pencils a bit further from the tip recently, so my lines are more kind of wavy and varied a bit, to make a nice kind of organic feel. But because if you paint everything with or draw everything with too stable lines, and the picture kind of becomes stiff. I also don't use rulers, as you know, because even like if I'm painting like a city scene, because again I think that if you use too much rulers and everything is nice and straight, it's nice and straight but also becomes kind of stiff. So I don't use rulers. So I think actually when painting like this, the line should be of course manageable, but if it's too perfect, it becomes kind of stiff. Like even when painting digitally, it of course depends on the style, but I prefer not to use like the straight line tool if I can. Okay, so there's like the parking lot line mirrored here in this part here, so I'll try to add it. Dope stick. Okay, I haven't used one of those, but I have seen them, and I think they are actually cool. Okay, Okay, so while this is still kind of wettish, I'm trying to add a bit of darker blue here in the down part of the metal here, so it becomes a bit 3D like. But this paper has almost no texture, so it's kind of hard to control the watercolors. I bought this sketchbook because I hoped it would be a bit better than the Moleskine ones that you all know, but I don't know if it's better. I think it may be worse even when it comes to watercolor handling than the Moleskine one. It's a bit nicer format because it's a bit taller than the Moleskine sketchbooks, watercolor sketchbooks. If you compare it to the Moleskine one, you can not drop everything here. Okay, if you compare it to the Moleskine one, here's the Moleskine one. It's a bit taller, like 2 centimeters taller, so it's a bit easier to use. But I don't like it too much. Yeah, the Rode Dopstick has like a fabric ball at the end, so it doesn't hurt your painting. I don't know what brush size is this because all the text went from this brush. I think it's size like 10, but I don't know if it helps you anything because if I measure it, the tip is about 17 millimeters, and it's the Raphael Soft Aqua brush that I usually use them for most of my paintings recently. So this paper is meh. It doesn't handle watercolors so well. It should be better for things like acrylics, I guess, acrylic gouache maybe, or just regular gouache. But for watercolors, it doesn't have nice texture, but also has a bit of texture, so it's kind of in the middle. It's not the best thing that you can get for watercolors, I'm afraid, but I bought it, so let's do some sketching in it. And it's a bit expensive also for what it's worth. I think it's even a bit more expensive than the Moleskine ones, which says something. Okay. I'm using a bit of indigo here, and I'll mix it with Caput Mortuum to make a nice kind of neutralish gray to paint more darker parts. So it has a nice chrome bumpers and also the lights here. Okay, so next question, I'll just... Do you usually get the colors straight from the pans and only mix colors when you do shadows or gradients? Even if I have a huge set like the one that I'm currently using, so it's I think 60 colors, and it speeds up the process because I don't have to mix all the colors that I use. Sometimes I can get away with using colors just straight from the pans. The set does not allow me to use just like colors from the pan straight all the time, but it makes mixing colors faster, and because I already have a lot of pre-mixed colors that I can use. But I don't think I do it often, like using colors straight from the pans. Mostly I mix, even for just usual painting, just usual parts like that are not gradients or anything. I usually use colors that are mixed in a way. Okay. But having a lot of colors allows for a bit faster work, and also having a few variations that are similar on the palette, I can do some mixes that are different in a way. So for example, if I use the Caput Mortuum, it's a really dark mix and intensive, and it has a lot of covering power. But if I use the Potter's Pink, which is really similar, I can get a color that has a lot of granulation and is more transparent. So even though the colors and the mixes are similar, they're different, so I can use them in different cases. So having a lot of colors on hand helps, but does not allow me to just paint straight from the pans. Okay, let's just color this in here. Like this, and let's put some shadow underneath the thing. Okay, and let's put some shadow inside also. I would like to answer some more of your questions, but they would require me to show something actually, because they are really kind of in-depth questions. So I'll probably answer them in some upcoming Q&As also. So for example, I had some blue on my brush and I just mixed in some Van Dyke brown to make this nice kind of neutral brown gray. So having a lot of colors in my palette allows me to do stuff like this really quickly, but it is not, I don't think it's kind of possible to just use them straight from the pans, even though I have a lot of colors. You could limit yourself, like just put a limit on yourself. So I'm using only straight colors from the pans, but it would make achieving some of the paintings that I did impossible. That is actually a nice challenge that you could do. Okay, so let's make a little bit more of indigo and caput mortuum mix, which makes this really rich and almost black color. So I can paint a bit of deeper shadows here and there. Okay, and especially the grill here. Which is of this fancy shape. Okay. And let's add some shadow in the interior. And the dashboard is lighter. Just like this. Okay. And this part actually is chrome. And let's add some how do you call them? Lane lines, I guess, on the parking lot, which are this orange color. So you can see this paper has a tendency to kind of repel the paint in places where I put my fingers on. So, and this can be a bit discouraging because sometimes it spoils your nice gradients. It is an often thing that is in papers that have not much watercolor texture, but this one is really sensitive to this. And it's the same with the watercolor Moleskine thing. Okay. And let's paint the number here. I have something on my brush. No. So it's like a stenciled in number on the pavement, and I like it, so I'll just paint it here. Okay, and let's add some details. This is a Hanemure brand, so it's a brand of paper that I actually use a lot for my prints, but I wanted to try also their version of this watercolor kind of sketchbook. I'll take a smaller brush, a bit smaller, like this one, to paint some details of the car, like the light here. Let's make it more orange. Okay, this is as orange as we can get it. And this line here also is reflected here, so let's put it here. Okay. So if you want to paint with gouache, acrylic gouache or anything like this would be okay, I think, but it's not so good for watercolors. Okay, I can answer some things about money. Of course, my Patreon is publicly visible, so you know how much support I get from Patreon, which is awesome amount of support, which allows me to pay my apartment bill and some additional things like gas and electricity. Let's put the number here, but let's make it a fake number. And I also am lucky enough that a lot of you are buying the prints from Society 6, which, even though Society 6 takes a lot of money, it requires zero work for me, because they print it and send it, so I don't have to do anything, just upload things to the service, and it's useful for you because you can buy a print and they send it and I don't have to deal with it, so it's faster, and you can buy it even when I have kind of holidays or I'm busy and just cannot process fast enough. And these two things currently allow me to kind of exist in Japan, just pay my bills and buy food and stuff. So sometimes I also do commissions to boost this. I also have some income from my books that give me a bit of percentage from the sales of the book, but because this percentage is really small, usually in Japan you get only like from 5 to 8% from the price of the book, so I get just a little bit amount of money from the Tokyo Storefront's book, for example, even though it sold quite a number of copies for especially for an art album which is colored. It is a nice number. To live in Japan independently and pay stuff like bills but also taxes when you're a freelance artist, you would need about probably 300,000 Japanese yen. And if you are living in Tokyo, which is what most like freelance, did I get this number right? So, because it's like 30 man, so it's Yeah, 300,000. Huh? But if you are living in Tokyo, then the costs of living are getting like 2-3 times higher than when you're living outside of Tokyo. So this is also one of the reasons why we decided to move outside of Tokyo when we started to do freelance work. So this is basically why I can pay my rent with Patreon, just because we are not living in the middle of Tokyo, because that would be impossible. So I'm adding some white details with a gel pen. This is like a Mitsubishi Signo. I like it because it's thicker than your regular. Okay, so I think we are kind of done with this. But I'm really grateful for your Patreon support, because it is actually what keeps us afloat with Kana, and we can sleep more soundly, because we know that this income is actually what pays our bills right now. Okay, so this is the car, and this is the pen. So I will make a separate YouTube video about this pen when I kind of get used to it better and have a bit more time to make a nice bigger and better painting with this that I can take more time with. And I'm now concentrating on doing as much stuff for the Tokyo at Night book as I can. I already did 19 paintings and 3 smaller paintings for this book, so I'm kind of 2/3 in making it, and when I finish it, I will have a bit more time to do stuff for Patreon also, but also doing stuff like testing things like this. And I will be posting a video about this and more information in the description of that video, so you can kind of go and buy one if you want. And it's actually a really nice thing. I like how it's made. I like the touch of it, and I like how it's made of kind of high grade aluminium, and it's a lot lighter than it seems, even though it's all metal. So it would be nice, it will be really interesting to see the final version of this product when it reaches the production stage, because now still it has a bit some places that are not like final versions. So okay, I have to do more testing on this, especially on better paper. Okay, so I hope I answered some of your questions, and if you have more questions, just ask them in the comments or send me an email, so you can ask them. I can answer them in the next Q&A. This Q&A will be added to the Q&A list, to the playlist, and I'll also scan this picture and send it to you on Patreon if you want it in good quality.
Yay!
Yay! And Kana is here also. Okay, so that's it. I hope you liked it. I hope I answered all your questions that I could right now, and I want to keep this one short because my voice is probably going to go away because I still have my cold and I need my voice to make a new video tomorrow or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Okay, so I'm sorry. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. If you have anything else to say, just write a comment, and I'll see you in the next Q&A. Okay, bye.